I need to see you sitting down for this one, because what I'm about to reveal about American car spending is going to absolutely blow your mind. You know that feeling when you check your bank account after making what you thought was just a normal purchase, and suddenly you're questioning every financial decision you've ever made? Well, that's exactly what happened to me when I started digging into the real numbers behind car ownership in America. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you're going to be looking at that vehicle sitting in your driveway in a completely different way. We're not just talking about the sticker price here. We're talking about the hidden financial monster that's been quietly draining your wealth for years, and most people have absolutely no clue it's even happening. Let me paint you a picture of what's really going on out there. The average American is spending over $9,000 every single year just to own and operate a vehicle. Yes, you heard that right, $9,000. That's not some made-up number I pulled out of thin air. That's cold, hard data from the Bureau of Transportation Statistics. And it gets so much worse from here. Think about what $9,000 actually means. That's a luxury vacation every year. That's a down payment on an investment property. That's maxing out your Roth IRA with money left over. But instead, it's vanishing into a depreciating asset that loses value the second you drive it off the lot. Now here's where things get really interesting. Most people think they understand car costs because they know their monthly payment, maybe they remember what they pay for insurance, and sure, they notice when they fill up the tank, but there's this entire universe of expenses hiding in plain sight that nobody talks about. I've spent the last 3 months interviewing financial experts, analyzing thousands of car ownership records, and breaking down every single expense category. And what I discovered is that the average person underestimates their true car costs by almost 40%. 40%! That's not a rounding error. That's a financial blind spot big enough to drive a truck through. Let's break down where all this money actually goes, because the details here are absolutely fascinating. First up, we've got depreciation, which is hands down the biggest cost of car ownership that nobody ever thinks about. The moment you sign those papers and drive your shiny new car home, it loses about 11% of its value immediately. Not over the first year, not over the first month, immediately. But wait, it gets even more mind-blowing when you factor in the financing costs. About 85% of new car buyers are financing their purchase, and the average auto loan has ballooned to over 70 months. That's almost 6 years of payments. The average monthly payment right now is hovering around $730 for new cars, and over $500 for used cars. When you multiply that out with interest rates that have been climbing, people are paying thousands and thousands of dollars just in interest charges. I met one guy who financed a $35,000 truck at a 7% interest rate over 6 years, and by the time he paid it off, he had paid over $41,000 total. That's $6,000 just handed over to the bank for the privilege of driving that truck a few years earlier. Then you've got insurance, and holy cow, this is where things have gotten absolutely out of control lately. The national average for full coverage auto insurance is now over $2,000 per year. In some states like Michigan, Florida, and Louisiana, people are paying well over $3,000 annually. That's like paying for a second car payment every month just for insurance. And if you're a younger driver or you've had any accidents or tickets, multiply those numbers significantly. I talked to a 23-year-old driver in New York who's paying almost $5,000 a year just for insurance on a basic sedan. That's more than $400 a month just to legally drive a car he already owns. Fuel costs are the one expense people actually notice because you're physically filling up that tank. But even here, most people drastically underestimate what they're spending. The average American driver puts about 13,500 miles on their car each year. Maintenance and repairs is another category where people constantly get blindsided. Sure, everyone knows they need to change the oil, but there's this constant stream of other expenses that add up incredibly fast. Tire replacements every few years, brake pads, brake rotors, transmission fluid, coolant flushes, air filters, battery replacements, and that's all just the routine stuff. Then you've got the unexpected repairs. A failed alternator here, a malfunctioning sensor there, maybe a transmission issue down the road. The average driver is spending about $1,200 per year on maintenance and repairs, but I've seen years where people get hit with $5,000 or $6,000 in unexpected repair bills. One woman I interviewed had to replace her transmission for $4,500 on a car that was only worth $7,000 at that point. Don't even get me started on registration fees, property taxes on vehicles in certain states, inspection fees, parking costs, and tolls. Depending on where you live, these can add hundreds or even thousands more to your annual car costs. In some major cities, monthly parking alone can run $500 or more. That's $6,000 a year just to have a place to put your car when you're not using it. Now, here's the really crazy part that nobody talks about. When you add up all these costs over the lifetime of car ownership for the average American, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. If someone starts driving at age 18 and drives until they're 70, that's 52 years of car ownership. At $9,000 per year, that's $468,000 spent on cars over a lifetime. But actually, it's way worse than that because of inflation and the fact that car costs keep rising faster than general inflation. When you account for realistic increases in costs over time, many Americans will spend well over $600,000 on cars throughout their lifetime. Want to know what really makes this insane? If instead of spending that money on cars, you invested it in a basic index fund earning a conservative 7% annual return, that same money would grow to over $3 million. $3 million! That's the opportunity cost of car ownership that absolutely nobody is talking about. Your car isn't just costing you money, it's potentially costing you financial independence, early retirement, generational wealth, and the freedom to live life on your own terms. But here's where it gets even more interesting, and this is something that really opened my eyes. Not everyone is spending $9,000 per year. There's this huge range in what people actually spend based on the choices they make. Someone who buys a 3-year-old reliable used car with cash, keeps it for 10 years, does basic maintenance and shops around for insurance might spend only $4,000 or $5,000 per year. Meanwhile, someone who leases a new luxury vehicle every 3 years, carries full coverage with a low deductible, and drives 30,000 miles annually could easily be spending $20,000 or $25,000 per year on transportation. The scary part is that most people are sliding toward the expensive end of that spectrum without even realizing it. Car companies have gotten incredibly sophisticated at making expensive decisions feel normal and affordable. They market based on monthly payments, not total cost. They offer longer and longer loan terms to keep those monthly numbers looking manageable. They've convinced an entire generation that you deserve a new car with all the latest features and that used cars are somehow risky or inferior. I interviewed a financial planner who told me that car payments are the single biggest obstacle preventing her clients from building wealth. She said that person after person comes into her office wanting to know why they can't get ahead financially, and when she looks at their budget, there's a $700 car payment staring her right in the face. She has them run the numbers on what would happen if they drove that car into the ground, then replaced it with a reliable used car they could buy with cash, and suddenly they're finding an extra $500 or $600 per month to invest. Over a 20 or 30-year career, that difference alone is enough to retire years earlier. There's also this massive psychological component to car spending that nobody wants to acknowledge. We've all been conditioned to see our cars as extensions of our identity. What you drive supposedly says something about who you are, how successful you've become, whether you've made it in life. Car commercials don't sell transportation, they sell lifestyle, status, and self-worth, and we fall for it. We fall for it hard. People will justify stretching their budget for a nicer car in ways they would never justify for almost any other purchase. They'll say things like, "I spend so much time in my car," or "I work hard, I deserve this," or "it's safer," without actually running the numbers on whether any of that makes financial sense. What really drives me crazy is how this affects young people just starting out. I cannot tell you how many 25-year-olds I've met who are driving around in $40,000 vehicles while complaining that they can't afford to save for retirement or buy a house. They've been sold this idea that a nice car is just part of being an adult, that everyone has a car payment, that this is just what you do. Meanwhile, they're sabotaging their entire financial future before it even gets started. That car payment is preventing them from building an emergency fund, contributing to their 401k, paying off student loans, or saving for a down payment. And the worst part is, in 10 years, that car will be worth maybe $15,000, while the opportunity cost of that lost investment time will be absolutely staggering. So what's the solution here? How do we escape this trap? First and foremost, we have to start seeing cars for what they actually are. They're not investments, they're not status symbols, they're not expressions of our personality. They're tools for transportation, period. The moment we can internalize that shift in perspective, everything else becomes easier. Second, we need to get ruthlessly honest about the total cost of ownership before we make any car buying decision. Not just the monthly payment, not just the sticker price, but depreciation, insurance, fuel, maintenance, everything. There are calculators online that will help you estimate these costs for specific vehicles. Third, and this is the big one, we should be buying reliable used cars with cash whenever possible and driving them for as long as they remain mechanically sound. I know that's not sexy, I know that's not what the car commercials are selling, but the math is undeniable. A 3- or 4-year-old Honda or Toyota with 50,000 miles on it will likely give you another 150,000 miles of reliable transportation at a fraction of the cost of a new vehicle. The depreciation curve has already played out. Insurance is cheaper. And if you're buying with cash, there's no interest expense eating away at your wealth. Look, I get it. Cars are fun, new cars smell amazing. There's something genuinely exciting about having the latest technology and features. I'm not saying you should never enjoy nice things or that everyone needs to drive a beater forever. What I am saying is that most people have no idea what they're actually sacrificing to have that new car experience. And if they did, if they really understood the numbers, many of them would make very different choices. Some people will run the numbers and decide that having a nicer car is worth it to them. And that's totally fine, as long as it's an informed decision based on reality rather than marketing and social pressure. The truth is, the wealthy people I've studied, the ones who have actually built significant net worth, tend to drive much more modest vehicles than you'd expect. They understand that every dollar spent on a rapidly depreciating asset is a dollar that's not working for them, not growing, not building their financial freedom. Meanwhile, the people driving the flashiest cars are often the ones living paycheck to paycheck, one emergency away from financial disaster. That's what your current car situation is going to cost you over the next decade. Now ask yourself, is there a cheaper way to accomplish the same goal of getting from point A to point B? What could you do with the difference if you cut that cost in half? This isn't about deprivation or living a miserable life to save every penny. This is about making conscious choices that align with your actual goals and values, rather than sleepwalking through financial decisions because that's just what everyone else is doing. If you truly value having a nice car more than early retirement, more than financial security, more than the freedom to take risks in your career because you're not chained to a car payment, then fine, make that choice. But make it consciously. Make it with full awareness of what you're trading away. The numbers I've shared with you today aren't meant to scare you or make you feel bad about choices you've already made. We've all been there. We've all fallen for the marketing. We've all made financial decisions we'd probably do differently with hindsight. The point is to wake up right now, today, and start making better choices going forward.